Hi friends, today I want to talk about a book that I find in most bookshelves. Most people know about it, and yet I have hardly met a person who has read the book fully or even a significant number of pages of it. I feel I do understand the reason for that. It is a complex book, it is set in a certain context, and therefore, people who are wanting to understand about the man who wrote the book are left deeply disappointed when they start reading the book. This book is by the most famous dictator of all times, Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. It is the autobiography of Adolf Hitler, and the words literally translate to my struggle. Now, I am no fan of Adolf Hitler, but I'm sure most of you are fascinated by the most powerful man, and dictator in probably the whole of history. And we are all interested to know what he thought and what were his views. That is why most of you probably bought this book, right? So let's try to understand and what is this book all about. To understand that, we need a bit of context into Hitler's life and the situation in his life when he wrote this book. What happens is a lot of people think that this book will have some facts and the stories from the World War II. But this book was written in 1923, long before Adolf Hitler became the dictator of Germany. So it was a book on his previous life, and the world events that had led till that time, and his, you can say, views on different topics on the general, like anything from art to literature to etc etc, to his political agenda. When he wrote this book, he was in jail. He had just nascently tried to start a political party and do a coup, and he was in jail when he wrote this book. That is what you need to understand also. So, to really understand Mein Kampf, what you need to really remember is why was this book written and what were the events that led to Hitler becoming who he was. And to appreciate that, you must remember that the Second World War was the world's greatest sequel. Now, what does it mean when you say that it is the world's greatest sequel? Because remember, there was a First World War before the Second World War. So, what really took place? You see, by the end of the 19th century, European nations ruled most of the world. England led that exercise from having colonies from all over Canada to India, etc., Australia, etc., etc. Then the French had certain colonies. The Russians, while they did not have any colonies, they dominated this huge landmass all the way to Kazakhstan and Siberia, etc., etc. One country that really felt left out, which has just recently unified and become very, very, very powerful economically and militarily, was Germany. Germany had always been the most powerful military nation, and once united became the most powerful economic nation and manufacturing hub. But it realized it did not have the kind of political power that, say, a Britain had. That led Germany's right led to this disquiet and a certain set of alliances. And Germany's alliance with this, what do you call, probably an ancient empire called the Habsburg Empire, which had a mix of many, you can say, cultures and different nationalities, if you want to call it. Okay, the Austrians, the Hungarians, the Czechs, Slovaks, etc., etc. And then there was also this uh, whole rivalry of Austria with Russia for domination of all of these Balkan states. It is in this context that the World War I was triggered. At that point of time, America, while it was rising as an economic power, was not taken too seriously as a military power, being far away and not really having that strong an army. In these hyper nationalist times, most peoples are really rooted for their country, most identified with the issues. And the few decades before the First World War happened, you see, most countries were vying for political space and colonies. Hitler describes his life in detail, his youth, and how he was shaped up by nationalist ideas, how he really felt the pain of Germany, and he, like many others, when the First World War actually started, were ones who celebrated it, a chance to serve their country in the army. He volunteered for the army as a lowly corporal. He fought in the First World War. This is all described in the Mein Kampf. And he fought very valiantly. And what happened was this: Germany ended up in a war on two fronts, the Western Front with Britain and France, and the Eastern Front. And soon it realized that its allies, the Austria Hungary Empire and Turkey, were really weaklings. So it was the one who had to pump in the effort to stop Russia from the east also. The First World War soon reached a stalemate with no end in sight. Finally, there was a breakthrough on the Eastern Front with Germany pushing Lenin, and the Russian Revolution happened. Russia decided to surrender, and the communist regime ended the war on the Eastern Front. For many lowly soldiers like Hitler and many others in Germany at that point of time, they thought they had beaten Russia, they had beaten one front, so they were good enough to beat the Western Front also. Now Germany would crush Britain and France and be victorious. But by that time, America had entered the war on the Allied side, and probably generals like the leadership and the Hindenburg and Lundenberg and all, they knew that the war was lost. They made one final effort in the spring of 1918, and then they knew, but they did not want this to be understood by the rank and file of the army. So many, like Hitler, were disgruntled when Germany sued for peace. This is the essence of what made Hitler Hitler. This is the most dramatic part of the Mein Kampf. At that particular moment, Adolf Hitler, while fighting, had been subjected to this, what was called at that time, the poison gas, and his eyes were under treatment in a hospital, and he was in the last few weeks he had been in a hospital. And when he heard this news that Germany was surrendering, and he very dramatically puts it as, he forgot his own pain, his own worry that he may never see again, and he wept profusely. That is the dramatic end of the first part of the Mein Kampf, out of the two parts. And what happened was, Britain had offered Jews a land of their own in Israel if they won the First World War. So some Jewish boys may have cheered or were going on promoting a revolution. This is what led Hitler to become such hateful of Jews. What he did not realize, and which we all understand probably today, I hope, is that a few people do not make a community. And if Germany was wanting, more lands for itself, probably in some manner, they were also right in wanting a country of their own. After all, they had suffered for thousands of years in every single country. But at that time, an Adolf Hitler was in no mood to understand that. Okay, this is the crux of the first part of the Mein Kampf, where he feels extremely betrayed by many sections of society, and Jews in particular, that they did not fight for Germany as he and many of his friends did. The second part of the Mein Kampf is about how nobody starts around meeting people and forming this nascent political party called the Nazi Party, with 4, 5, 6 members, slowly and slowly taking on opponents, debating, building a force, and his views of the future, how Germany should go about re establishing its pride, etc. etc. This is the whole context to Mein Kampf. This is now you would be able to probably appreciate Mein Kampf and now understand what is written there. It builds up to the point where Hitler has a political philosophy, a small political party in place. He is in jail. When he comes out of jail, is when he really, goes into a exponentially rising political career. But Mein Kampf ends where his part of our coming out of ignominy ends, and he captures the events that shaped him as we know him today. I hope this will give you a chance to understand and read the dictator's book and at least realize what he was trying to say. You can at least really connect with his views. There is no way you can connect with a man who killed so many people, but at least history being history, you can understand, okay, this is the context in what he was talking. That is what I would want you to, if you bought the book, you can at least try to really appreciate that glimpse of history and know what really went on in his mind when he had all that anguish, all that anger, and that led to the Second World War. And this was the man behind the events.